And now we'll have Rachel speaking about uses and abuses of humour.
Good afternoon. It's quite warm in here. If you need to strip, far be it from me to stop. So this year I'm a performer and writer, and this year I've been working on a project which ends in a show called The Way You Tell Them. And it's about uses and abuses of humour, and it's about that kind of personally, but also societally and politically. So I'm just going to talk a little bit with some of the stories from the show, and then talk a little bit about the research that I have been doing. So it sort of started as ever with Yom Kippur, which is the Jewish Day of Atonement. So it's a day which comes every year, and you go to the synagogue and you apologise on repeat for 24 things that you have maybe sinned, and maybe you haven't. Maybe the world's done them, but you have the responsibility to apologise for them. So there's this list of 24 things, and you stand and you beat your chest on each one. And they're things like, we have been violent, we have betrayed, we have spoken ill of other people. And then this year, for the first time, I noticed one that I'd missed previously. And in Hebrew, it's latznu. And it means we have clowned around, we've made a bad joke about things, we've ridiculed good people. And this all prevents us from real repentance because we never take anything seriously enough. And I thought, well, yes. And then I thought, well, why don't I take things seriously enough? So then I spent the next year kind of going in search of that question. And it started, as ever, again, from Yom Kippur to my family. So my family has this really long tradition of joke telling. And we never actually know how anyone in the family is, because we never ask each other. But we do phone each other and just say, this man walks into a bar, because we just swap jokes all the time. And apparently my grandfather was the major joke teller, but he died just before I was born, so I never met him. And there's a story about his funeral, which we'll get to in a bit. But I found out recently what his favourite joke was, and it was this one. Confucius, he say, woman who cooks carrots and peas in the same pot, she not so hygienic. Which I found really disappointing. Because with our family history, I hoped it would be something a bit more like this one. If you find yourself in a room with Hitler, Pol Pot, and a gun with 2 bullets in it, who do you shoot first? You shoot Hitler twice. Or if you're from Cambodia, then the joke ends, you shoot Pol Pot twice. So there's a story about his funeral that ends 3 different ways, depending on who you ask. If you ask my mother, it ends, it was awful. If you ask my grandmother, which frankly would be quite insensitive, but if you were to ask her, it would end, well, we lost so many people already. Life's not easy. Because that Hitler joke was my way of not quite telling you that 33 out of 36 members of one generation of my family were killed in the Holocaust. And if you ask my father how the story ends, he says, it was hilarious! Which is why we can't talk about that story altogether as a family. Actually, in the show, I say, Hitler killed 33 out of 36 members of my family. It sounds good. So I thought, well, I'll phone my mum and I'll check on the numbers, because I want to make sure this is truthful. So I phoned her and I said, can you get the family tree out and check on those numbers? So I heard her unfolding the family tree, and she was counting up all the members of the dead. And it was only 12. And I said, that's not enough. It really needs to be really sad at this point, the show. So we found these other cousins who had committed suicide rather than, so we thought we'd count them. So if I'm honest with you, it's only 14. It's not 33, but it doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? Anyway, so my grandparents, they left Nazi Germany, and they settled in this tiny Nottinghamshire village where they were only Jews for miles. And they were really well accepted, and he was kind of well loved as a joke teller. And then he died really suddenly at 64. And he was going to have a Jewish funeral. So all the people from the village, all the Christians, came and travelled to their nearest Jewish burial ground for what would be their first Jewish funeral. So you turn up, and first of all, there are some prayers in a prayer hall, and then you walk along to the grave. And they got to the grave, and the coffin was being lowered into the ground. And it became obvious that the hole was not big enough. So the coffin got stuck. So the guys at the back tried to lift their ropes to tip it in front ways, but that didn't work. So then the guys at the front tried to lift their ropes to tip it in back ways, but that didn't work either. So eventually the coffin was teetering back and forward on a central point until the lid of the coffin started to pop off, whereupon the guy leading the burial service jumped on top of the coffin and jumped up and down on it, until it got to the bottom of the grave, and then he had to be hauled out of the grave. And all the local Christians from the village just stood in respectful silence. And then my dad caught eyes with his cousin and lost it laughing, because he was imagining that this is what all these Christians think happens at Jewish funerals. Anyway, this is the sort of defining story, I think, of how I've got to where I've got to now. I wasn't there. I was in my mother's stomach. He died, major joke teller. I was born, major joke. It's like the Lion King with the handing over. And so this past year I've been trying to decide how much of this is a privilege, this kind of inheritance, and how much of it is more of a burden. And like, joking hasn't always, I mean, it's gone well for me most of the time, but then during the process of the show, I sent an email out to some friends and said, have I ever got it wrong? And they said, yep, got it wrong quite a lot. My ex-boyfriend was an actor, and he got an audition for The Archers and didn't get it. First real audition, didn't get it. And so a week later, I gathered all my friends around, and we phoned him on speakerphone. And a friend of mine pretended to be the producer from The Archers, and said, "Hi, thanks so much for your audition. I'm really sorry you didn't make it. But the truth is that the actor playing Joe Grundy has been taken ill. So we wondered if you could do your best Joe Grundy impression, and then maybe you could take over for a couple of weeks." So my boyfriend said, "I'll have a pint of ale, please." It's terrible, all this foot and mouth, isn't it? And Ambridge. And we laughed and laughed until he hung up. And it took another 2 years for me to break up with him instead of just constantly ridiculing him. That's just a little example of an abuse of humour, possibly. So I've been trying to see what happens when you don't go for the joke, both in my work and also in sort of interpersonal relationships, because I always feel that if I'm writing from 1 to 10, trying to get to 10, at 7 there'll be this great joke that I go for. So I never really find out what's in 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've kind of been trying to do that this year. And if I'm in the office and I think of something funny, I write it down and I don't say it. And my colleagues have said, "What's the matter? Don't seem yourself at all. Something wrong?" I was going, "No, I'm just trying for the first time to be serious." See, anyway, so I've been thinking about joking, and I realised that it's a way of my dealing with my own discomfort. It's a way of never having to be the finite mouthpiece of an opinion, because you can always, there's this thing called decommitment. You say a thing that you believe, you listen to the crowd response. If you feel like it's not going well and they disagree with you, you can just do this and go, "Only joking." It's great. You never have to be the mouthpiece of anything. You can always just twist and turn all the time. You never have to commit. And also, I think I've been finding there's this kind of resurgence in stand-up at the moment, some of it which is deeply intelligent and brilliant, some of it less so. And I think it might come about from this kind of postmodern or post-postmodern place we're in at the moment, where everything is a comment on everything. Everything is ironic and filtering and flippant, and that is far more popular, and it's an easier place to sit than the serious and the mundane and the potentially really boring, because who really wants to be the mouthpiece of that? Also, there's a controlling aspect to humour, because as long as we're laughing, we're not really seeing. We're not really being invited to see it. It's a kind of magician's misdirection by the teller, who seems to be inviting us as an audience to share something, to be witnesses, to get to know each other's insides, but actually they're controlling the amount of information they're revealing at any one time. So I walk into a room and I'll make a joke about my nose before any of you can, because I question whether I'm robust enough to take your criticism. I can choose to operate in a framework where I just joke all the time, where I can control how much you genuinely see me and how much I really reveal to you. Or I just keep deflecting it with laughter time after time after time. It's a form of emotional and sometimes aggressive control. It's a form of domination, and it's a way to close down any true exchange, because God knows what we find out about ourselves and each other if we actually talked. So this is the kind of journey I suppose I'm on. I don't want to reject joking completely, because I think it's brilliant. And how else do you deal with the Holocaust other than commit suicide? I'm glad that Holocaust joke got it. Thank you, that woman. But I'm still, at the moment, I'm treading this tightrope between kind of decommitment to myself and my opinions, between using joking to hide kind of genuine feelings, using humour to potentially be harmful in relationships and to debase other people. And also, on the other side, the kind of joyful connection that humour can offer. But luckily, because I'm Jewish, at Yom Kippur, if I get it wrong, I just get to apologise each year. So I will continue on this journey. Thank you very much for listening.